don't want to flick it. I'm on. Hey, good morning. Sorry. We got several things going on here. I have a ladybug on my notes, and I don't want to smash it, and I don't want to flick it off. Just go, buddy, sweetie. Okay, well, she's just going to stay there. Good morning. Welcome to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary Connection service on Tuesday morning. It is literally freezing this morning, and we thought that the roads might be icy, so Pastor D.E. decided to stay home in Marietta, which I advised him to do. So he is not with us this morning, but he is probably watching as soon as he gets out of class. So hello, hello. I wanted to read you something funny. That's what I was trying to find when we came on. A Facebook friend of mine, Patrick Carden, if you're watching sometimes, I don't know if he does or not, but thank you for this. I thought this was pretty funny. He said, "This is actual advice the news is giving to Southerners for driving in snow and ice. If you rarely drive on snow, just pretend you're taking your grandma to church. There's a platter of biscuits and 2 gallons of sweet tea in glass jars in the back seat. She's wearing a new dress and holding a crock pot full of gravy." So that is how we should all drive when it is snow and ice in the South, because none of us know how to appropriately handle that. This morning before I left, I actually asked my husband, I said, "Okay, now if I should hit ice, what is it I'm supposed to do?" He said, "Just let go of the wheel and don't hit the brake." So that is what was in my mind when I was coming this morning, but it was fine. Everything was fine. So on this very chilly, cold Georgia morning, we are going to begin with our morning blessing. Spirit of truth, we thank you for this new day in which we are filled with gratitude. We are grateful for another day to live out our lives in freedom, in happiness, and in joy. We give thanks to you for both the tangible and intangible daily bread that you provide for us. We live and move and have our being in the perfect, unconditional love that lives in our hearts. We are grateful now for that which we have already received, and are grateful in advance for more than we can ask or think coming into our lives on a daily basis. We commit ourselves today and every day this year to get happy, stay happy, and be happy, and see what happens. In the name and nature of the Christ, amen, and so it is. Okay, so a couple of things before we start. I just want to be grateful. Our friend and fellow minister John Scott was in the hospital over the weekend with COVID, but he is home and recovering, so we are thankful and grateful for that. Miss Rosaline Cooper, I know last week we said a prayer for her, and I said keep her in your hearts because she went through a procedure last Wednesday. Her daughter, Janity, has been in touch with Pastor Brandy. We don't know what the results are yet, but we are keeping in touch with her, and we are still praying for you, Miss Rosaline, and we love you so very much if you are watching us this morning. So I'm going to begin with our quotes, and all of the quotes today come from the same source. Several years back, I got a daily email called Notes from the Universe that was written by a man named Mike Dooley, and he wrote them to you as if he were the universe speaking to you. And it was just a cute little thing that he would send every day. So all of the quotes this morning are from that series of Notes from the Universe. I just wanted to explain that, of how the format goes. So the first one says, "Do not be alarmed as you walk down the path of life to suddenly find you don't have the foggiest idea of how your grandest dreams will one day come to pass. This is a good thing, a really good thing. Just keep walking." Next, being in the right place at the right time isn't something you can force. It just happens when you keep busy, effortlessly. Imagine that. So I wanted to just stop here and say that imagine that can be taken 2 ways. You know, people say, imagine that, like, well, isn't that something? But another way you could take that is imagine that. Actually put in your imagination. Imagine being at the right place at the right time, and then don't worry about the details of how you're going to get there. That's what he says. It just happens when you keep busy effortlessly. Okay, next, raise your sights and broaden your steps, because doing one without the other is the same as doing neither. Okay, I love this one because several, I guess, months ago, maybe even a year or so ago now, I gave an example of sometimes, and this kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today, when you're building a building, especially a really tall building, there's only so high you can go before it topples over unless you have the an appropriately deep and broad at the bottom, wide foundation. You have to go almost as wide as you go tall, because if not, then there's no foundation to keep the building up and it will go over. So this is saying, raise your sights, yes, make it your intention to go higher, but you have to remember there's only so high you can go before you have to dig down and get a little broader. Also, my brother talked about that a little bit Sunday. He said, "Oh, I don't want to go, buddy. I'm going to try to turn this page without disturbing the lady." Oh. Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm going to quit worrying about this bug. Bless her heart. She's going to be fine in Jesus' name. So this quote also reminded me of something my brother said on Sunday in his sermon about broadening your idea of love out from just loving one person as in romantic love, or even loving just the people around you who are in your neighborhood, who are your neighbors, into being in love or falling in love with the idea of love instead. And so that made me think of a quote that I had written down from somewhere in one of my journals years ago, and I was able to find it. Let me open it up here, because it says this: "Trust love, not another or yourself. No person is worthy of total trust. Any man," and right here they're speaking of mankind, man or woman, "will at times waver in his love or falter in his commitment. And you will often waver in your own capacity to love yourself, as you often have. Only love, the love that yearns open at the heart of all beings, the divine love that lives open, is worthy of total trust. Rather than devoting yourself to a man or to yourself, you can trust, surrender to, and be lived open as love. Love is your discipline, and it is not always easy." So I love that quote, because it was a real epiphany to me years ago when I read it. Is, look, every person is human, and they are going to at sometimes fail you. So don't put all of every bit of your trust into any man or woman. Put your trust in the idea of love itself, because that's what we're all made of at our core anyway. Our divinity is love. So trust that part of any human that you love. That was just your little free part for today. Next quote, and I believe this is the last one. "One little known secret to making precisely the right move at precisely the right time in your life is knowing that in all cases there is more than one right move and more than one right time. Lots and lots more. In other words, no matter what you do next or when, so long as you do something, I'll meet you there. Smooth the edges, polish the grill, and connect the dots." And of course, that was the universe or God speaking to you. Okay, so all of our quotes today were more or less about doing something. They were about taking action, which I think gets a bad rap sometimes by spiritual teachers who heavily emphasize being as if it's more important than doing, myself included, because I tend to lean that way in most of my teaching. But here's why. It's not that being is more important than doing intrinsically, because obviously both are necessary. It's just that our culture has been so dominated by doing and have neglected our beingness and just being present for so long now, that in order for balance to be restored between the two, there had to, for a while, be a really heavy emphasis on our presence and our being. I'm sure you all understand that. But that doesn't mean action or doing things is not important. It just needs to be appropriately balanced. The reason we're so doing or action oriented is because our society has also been masculine dominant now for a very long time, which has brought with it the glorification of doing, the glorification of action above being. But as I've mentioned before, if we all just sat in meditation on a yoga mat for 8 to 10 hours a day, then there are some vital and necessary things that would not get done. And that kind of lifestyle is just as out of balance as the other extreme, which I believe, as I've also said before, is why we as a society had to experience a pretty radical slowdown and at times even a total shutdown over the last year or so with the advent of COVID-19. For decades and possibly even centuries, there were signs that we were getting out of balance, that we were headed in the wrong, if you want to use that terminology, direction, but we didn't listen. We just kept going and making doing more and more important than being. And after so long, the universe had to step in and help us out. Mother Nature had to say, okay, you didn't listen to the gentle warnings. You missed all the subtle signs. So now I'm going to have to speak a little louder. So you'll have no choice but to pay attention. So 2020 was definitely an attention-getting year, but we've been still and kind of confined now for a while. We've all had a good amount of time to reevaluate and make some life adjustments to figure out what's more important than other things. Not everyone has done this, but at least we have all been given the opportunity to do so. Someone put a post up on Facebook the other day that I really love. For those of you who follow astrology, there's something that happens from time to time called Mercury retrograde. Well, actually, all of the planets go retrograde at one time or another, which just means backward motion. More accurately, perceived backward motion. Technically, retrograde is defined as an apparent change in the direction of movement of a planet through the sky. It is not real because no planet actually physically changes direction and moves backward in its orbit. It just appears to do so because of the relative positions of the planets and how they move around the sun. So, all planets appear to go what we call retrograde, but Mercury is the planet that it happens to most often, and it also gets the most attention because Mercury retrograde is associated with things like lack of energy, breakdowns in communication or in communication technology. A lot of times during this time, if your computer goes haywire, people will blame it on the energy of Mercury retrograde, as well as the inability for us to communicate clearly and effectively due to brain fog or chaotic, scattered energy or heightened restlessness and anxiety. So Mercury retrograde, if you place any significance at all on astrology, is something usually to dread. But this Facebook friend of mine posted this a few weeks ago about this period of time, which, by the way, we are in right now, that is known as Mercury retrograde. And his name is Ty Andrews. I'll give you credit for this post, which just said, review, renew, realign, renegotiate, revise, recalibrate. Mercury retrograde. See, I can't even speak. And I thought, well, that's a positive spin on Mercury retrograde for a change. It gives us the opportunity to stop or at least slow down, pause for a moment, put all of our doing, all of our busyness on the back burner for a bit, and do these things that are necessary. Review, renew, realign, renegotiate, revise, and recalibrate. In a larger sense, all of 2020 was an opportunity for us to do all of those things. So that whenever we do begin again with our doing, with our action, we can do it from a more enlightened place. We've talked about before about two things can look exactly the same, but be coming from a very different place inside with a very different motivation. So when COVID finally does settle down, if everything just goes back to normal or what had become what we think of as normal, then what have we gained? Okay? If we just go back to everything as normal, what have we gained? We really need for this time to have counted for something. There is a Zen saying that goes like this: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And we'll get to the meaning of that a little bit later. But right now, I want to read something that I've read to you before as a bit of an explanation for how we got here, how we normalized this doing being more important than being. Because it's good sometimes to know where it is you're starting from. You know all those pictures that people are posting on Facebook? They'll have two pictures and they'll say how it started, how it's going. So this is the explanation I'm about to read you is our how it started. Okay? This is an excerpt from a talk by a woman named Jill Lepore called The Cult of Disruptive Innovation, Where America Went Wrong. She begins, to my view, a lot of our contemporary political crisis derives from an abandonment of the idea of moral progress. When this country was founded in the 18th century, its framers subscribed to an ideal that progress must be moral, and the idea largely came from Christianity. All of the writers of the founding documents didn't necessarily claim to be Christians per se. Some of them described themselves as deists, but they all certainly defined progress as anything that was designed to help the most people. And they believed that people should act as a republic with a common endeavor to behave within a community where we help one another and view any achievement through the lens of that achievement being moral. That changed over the course of the 19th century when progress came to be defined more technologically. Inventions such as the railroads, the telegraph, and the camera caused people to start viewing progress only in terms of linear motion, where each machine made the world better because things would and could go faster and goods would become cheaper. Okay, so remember what I was talking about a few minutes ago? That building, if you only go up or if you only go forward, and you don't come underneath that with the foundation, in this case, that would be some sort of morality that says this is a good thing, because all new things are not good things. So if you don't do that, then this is what happens. So very quickly, the ideal of moral progress was replaced with progress only in terms of financial prosperity. Too often, the answer to the question of how is the country doing is it's doing great because it's prosperous, with no thought of any other means of measurement. The slippage from progress being defined as we've made a more just society, a more perfect union, to a lot of people are making a lot more money than they used to, and many more goods have become cheaper so that more people can buy them, was glaringly clear. So we slipped from that first one for this whatever this thing that's called progress being good for people to progress only being about it made things cheaper and faster and less expensive so that more people could have it. And that was indeed a moral slippage because the health and success of the entire country began to be based on the health of its economy alone and no other factors. Then in the 20th century, which is the one where most of us here have lived most of our lives, the 1900s, the idea of what progress was expanded from not only the collective health of the economy as a whole to how much we were able to consume as individuals. And people began to be judged and to judge themselves by how much stuff they could buy or own. This is known as the birth of consumerism. It was said the standard of living is rising and we are continually inventing new machines and technology. Therefore, we have progress. Even though that progress included things like the atomic bomb. Little dude, get off. Okay. This ladybug is going to be, okay, I'm really trying to protect it. Eventually, okay, so Progress was even considered things like the atomic bomb, which we eventually used in World War II to destroy entire cities of another country, Japan. The atomic bomb would never fit the definition of progress held by the founding fathers. Yet by the mid-20th century, that's where our collective mindset had gotten to. And by the 1980s, people had started defining innovation as progress. But historically, the definition of innovation was progress without any concern for morality. Now, an important distinction here, not that innovation is immoral, just that it doesn't necessarily concern itself with morality. Innovation originally meant novelty or something new for its own sake. The emphasis was on the fact that it was new and different only, not on whether it was good for most people, which was the original definition of progress. So you see the little shift there that we made. But in the 1980s and 1990s, these two words began to be used synonymously. And people thought anything innovative or new and different was progress, when that just wasn't the case, as illustrated by the example I gave of the atomic bomb. The point is, just because something is new doesn't mean it's good. But that philosophy became widespread throughout American culture in the 80s and 90s, right at the end of the 20th century. During this same time, there was a lot of talk in the corporate world about disruptive innovation, where it became a virtue to overturn the status quo, even if the status quo was doing pretty well and good for the majority of the people. We as a country became obsessed with the thought process that newer always means better, whether or not it is a good thing for society. So, do you remember the movie Wall Street and its famous tagline, "Greed is good"? That pretty much describes the corporate America of the 1980s. That idea expanded right on through to the present day, and creative disruption and destruction in any form is fine as long as it serves to turn the economic engine and make some people, not all people, a lot of money. Economic growth has become all that matters, not the public good, not decency or morality, not the health of the republic at large. All that matters is that something is innovative or new and that it disrupts what was already in place before it. Fast forward to 2016, which is why we got to the place where we elected somebody like Donald Trump, because he was considered in the minds of many as the great disruptor. Didn't matter that he didn't have any political experience. Didn't matter what his personality was. He was just there to disrupt what was, and that was all we had come to care about. This is her point here. And so we made this reckless and heedless corporate value an American value, which is a complete abdication of what the true spirit of progress should be about. Now, all of us that consider ourselves progressive should remember what the true definition that she's saying here of progress is. It can't just be something new, different, better, faster, whatever, disruptive of what already is. It must have that moral foundation that it is good for most of the people. The whole ideology of disruptive innovation has become much like a cultish religion that has also crept into civil government. Our government was not originally designed to have as one of its virtues economic growth at any and all cost. Our government was designed by men who believed business should have the public good at heart. They believed that government should be there to protect their citizens' capacity to conduct their business by creating and upholding civil order and safety for things like transportation of goods from one place to another. The government was originally supposed to be responsible for all kinds of services that made it possible for businesses to thrive, as well as to protect the public by doing things like making sure our food and medicines are safe, etc. But how many times in recent memory have stories been uncovered about companies continuing to make money at the expense of people's health and the health of the environment, while the government turns a blind eye because it has become so entangled with corporations, and because corporations have so many politicians in their pockets? So that's where the talk from Miss Lepore ends. So going forward, these are just my observations. Somehow, money has become the bottom line and our highest priority. And the religion that calls itself Christianity has also somehow become inextricably intertwined with American politics through the gospel of prosperity. Now, this is a concept that became popular in the church around the same time in America that we started saying and believing greed is good, okay? You see how one affects the other? So I looked up the term prosperity theology, and here's what I found. Prosperity theology, sometimes referred to as the prosperity gospel, is a religious belief among some Christians who hold that financial blessing and physical well-being are always the will of God for them, and that faith, positive speech, or as some used to refer to it, name it and claim it, and donations to religious causes will increase one's own material wealth. In this doctrine, sickness and poverty are viewed as curses to be broken by faith and righteous action. Financial wealth is interpreted as a blessing from God given as a reward for positive confession, visualization, and donations. Okay, we've all heard the pastor say, if you will send me X amount, God will bless you. So here we are, okay? So back when I first read this to you, I said, here we are in 2018. Here we are in 2021, 3 years later. And we're basically in a large portion of the Christian church at the same place. The church and corporate culture and civil government are all running on parallel streets here, with the notion that greed is not only okay, but it's good, okay? That more and bigger and new is always better. Any innovation or person who turns the economic engine by increasing the financial bottom line or disrupts the established order is not only acceptable, but superior. And if you're sick or poor, or if any of those things, it's your own fault because there's something you're not doing enough of. You don't have enough faith, or you didn't donate enough, or you're not abiding by XXX rules that they have given you. We've somehow become a nation where winning is the only thing that matters, okay? And we just saw that, fast forwarding now again to present day, 2021. We just saw that play out on the national stage when a bunch of United States senators decided that their bid for re-election was more important than looking at the facts and doing the right thing. So still today, that is an issue. Okay, thus ends the mini history lesson of how we got here. As I said, certainly up until COVID hit in 2020, this was the track our train was barreling down on all three of those fronts: the government, the church, and corporate America. So progress was all about more and bigger and winning and lots of money, no matter what the collateral damage was to society. And some people are obviously still in that mindset. Those are the people who just want things to go back to normal, which should actually be stated as the way things were, which wasn't really normal at all. It had become normal because we normalized it, but it was way, way out of balance. And as the lady whose talk I just read from so accurately put it, is what happened when we started using the words and the ideas, innovation and progress interchangeably, forgetting that whereas innovation just refers to anything new and different, Progress is supposed to have at its core a morality that is based on what is good for the most number of people. And I'll just go ahead and say it because why stop now? That is basically the basis of the slogan, Make America Great Again. That means that they don't want to shift into the higher consciousness that is now upon us. They don't want to move forward into a world and a culture that is based on fairness and equity for everyone. They want to go back to a time when things were actually much less equitable and just and fair. But now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, and we're by no means on the other side of it yet, but there is light at the end of the tunnel now, thank God. Now that we've had at least a year to take a pause, to step back, and to, as my friend Tyrone said, that's his name, right? Ty. I don't know what it stands for. Sorry, Ty, if it's not Tyrone. But we've been given the chance to take a pause, review, renew, realign, reinvent, renegotiate, revise, and recalibrate. We have the choice to either continue down that track where progress has no moral compass, or we can begin to take action again from a higher consciousness and more enlightened place. So speaking of enlightenment, let's go back now to that Zen proverb or saying that I mentioned earlier before that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. I'm going to read now some excerpts from an article about the meaning of this saying, or koan, as it's called. If you've never heard that, it's spelled Koan, by a man named Kyle Kowalski. He says, one of the greatest aspects of ancient quotes and stories is that they are subject to interpretation. Here is my own personal take, along with some of my favorite explanation of its meaning, talking about this Zen koan. Number one, although it appears nothing has changed on the outside, and he put in parenthesis, doing, everything has changed on the inside. And then he put in parenthesis, being. On the surface, the visible external actions of chopping wood and carrying water, which is just a representation of any action that we do, are the same before and after enlightenment. So what's changed? It looks the same whether you're enlightened or whether you're not. The deeper, invisible, and internal, your presence, awareness, perception mindset. That's what the difference is. Your body may be busy still, but your mind is calm and still. You are present instead of preoccupied. In simple terms, I can say that before I developed the true nature of wisdom, when I chopped wood and carried water, my mind was everywhere. It was heavily polluted with mental obstructions and scattered thoughts. I was not present. After I found the essence of my mind and true wisdom, or as we talked about last week, after he got in touch with his I am, then I experienced enlightenment. To the external eye, nothing is different. I still appear to be chopping wood and carrying water. But in fact, when viewed with the internal eye, everything is different. Everything has changed. Growing up, and still to this day, I can hear my dad saying, do what you're doing while you're doing it. And don't do what you're not doing while you're not doing it. That means don't be doing something and thinking about doing something else. Be present doing what you're doing. Or, as Eckhart Tolle says in his book, A New Earth, doing is never enough if you neglect being. The ego knows nothing of being, but instead believes you will eventually be saved by your doing. If you are in the grip of the ego, you believe that by doing more and more, you will eventually accumulate enough doings to make yourself feel complete at some point in the future. You won't. You will only lose yourself in the doing. The entire civilization is losing itself in doing that is not rooted in being, and this becomes futile. All right, so note here that this quote from Eckhart Tolle He's not saying that doing is bad or unnecessary, just that it becomes futile and ineffective if it's not rooted in being. There has to be that balance I was talking about before. Progress for progress' sake with no moral compass isn't really progress and doesn't really accomplish anything. It actually only serves to set us back, as we've seen play out in our own culture. In some ways and in some areas, we're further behind and less evolved today than we were, say, in the 1970s, before we got completely sidetracked into the whole greed is good thing. Back to Kyle now. Number 2, the second meaning he finds in the Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Number 2, the second meaning and interpretation is mastering your mind allows you to appreciate the extraordinary miracles in ordinary life. Chopping wood and carrying water are not glamorous activities, but if you are able to master your mind, you will find the extraordinary in the ordinary, the magic in the mundane. Do you choose to see the burden or the beauty? Are you focused on the presence or your productivity? Before enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water, but secretly wish to get out of doing it. You grind through your daily activities through habit, really wishing you could be doing something else. In this way, you are a victim of and a slave to your circumstances. The wood is chopping you, so to speak. There is no way to escape when you are coming from this mentality. After enlightenment, you realize you are in harmony with the universe. So you see that there is actually nothing more important than chopping wood and carrying water. All activities are equalized, and there is no discrimination because there is no ego in them anymore. No feeling of the work you're doing being unimportant or unappreciated. You no longer feel the need to escape because you have now mastered your mind and have the ability to flip your perspective on any activity at will. Now you look at it as your choice to chop wood and carry water. Instead of resisting and loathing repetitive daily routines and chores you don't want to do, you can choose gratitude for the small things, that you have hands, strength, and health to perform these actions. Mastering your mind is your own responsibility. Remember, I love this quote, the only Zen you find on the top of a mountain is the Zen you bring there. Here's another quote that I've heard that I think fits well here. Don't think of it as having to do something. Think of it as getting to do something. Okay, number 3, his third interpretation of the meaning of this. Life goes on during and after enlightenment. Everything in life is impermanent. Even enlightenment is transient. If, when you achieve enlightenment, it's not like you can say, whew, thank goodness, I'm finally enlightened. That was a long journey, but I'm glad I've made it to the end. If you view everything you do as chopping wood and carrying water, you will soon realize you have to constantly maintain present awareness. Since enlightenment is a state of being and not a destination, that means we all still have to go on living even after attaining it. The goal then is to have your doing firmly rooted in being in order to create awakened doing. Awakened doing is the alignment of your outer purpose, or what you do, with your inner purpose, which is awakening and staying awake to your I am. Through awakened doing, you become one with the ongoing purpose of the universe, and consciousness flows through you into the world. It flows into your thoughts and inspires them, then it flows out through what you do and is therefore guided and empowered by the consciousness of the universe. Wow. So that's really all I have for you today. As I said, we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and before too much longer, things will begin to open back up. And I know a lot of people are anxious to get back out there. The question is this: Will we just go back to the constant busyness of doing, just as it was before? Or will we take back into the outside world a new version that he calls here awakened doing, where we're still chopping wood and carrying water, but it's very different now because we've used this pause, this time of retrograde, as it were, to review, renew, realign, renegotiate, revise, and recalibrate so that our outer purpose or our action is now inspired and guided by an enlightened inner purpose rooted in our being, in our I am. I know which one I'm going to choose, and I hope you choose that second one as well. Amen? Amen. All right. At this time, usually my brother comes up and gives a little greeting and talks to you and gives some shouts out. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then I'm going to look at my phone. Hopefully, Pastor Brandy has sent me the shouts out. She has? Okay. Okay, and I want you guys to know my little ladybug is still here. It went all over my notes the entire time. Esther, it's for you. I have called my niece Esther Ladybug since she was born. Okay, here we go. All right. Live on live stream, Facebook and YouTube. Miss Bobby Moore Howard. Miss Bobby Moore Howard sent me a really sweet Valentine's text the other day. Thank you for that. Daddy is on. Callie and Emma Gozier, Ben and Vicky Mullins, Annette Eubanks, Laverne Bryant, Alita Brown, Doreen Panton, who is so faithful to send me little Facebook messages every single day, Mary Hayes, Sheila Smith, Nehemiah Garrett, Patricia Shepard, Terry Johnson, Josephine Walker, Jackie Smith Granderson, Rosaline Cooper, yay! I see that she has a comment below, and Elaine Jeffries also has a comment below. Miss Rosaline says, good morning, a beautiful and blessed day. Let's rejoice and be glad in it. Oh, I'm so happy that you're watching, Miss Rosaline. And Elaine Jeffrey says, good morning, family. I miss all of you. Love you. Thank you for your prayers. Feeling much better. We're so glad to hear that, Miss Elaine. By the way, Esther and I are laughing at your ladybug invasion. She sent it. It's her fault. But he's still here somewhere. Okay. Thank you. Oh, he's right here. I almost put my phone on him. Hey, buddy. Please join us tomorrow night at 7 p.m. for our continuing series, Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. And on Sunday, it is, what letters are we on? Does anyone know? J through P. J through P. We will see you next Sunday. I love you. Have a wonderful day. Stay warm. Don't drive unless you have to. Bye.